Glamour Shots wasn't just a photography studio. In the 1990s, it was a cultural moment, a rite of passage, and a pop culture time capsule of everything bold, flashy, and over the top about the era. When you think of glamour shots, you might imagine feather boas, leather jackets, teased hair, dramatic makeup, and soft, glowing filters that made everyone look like a superstar. For many people, a trip to Glamour Shots was an unforgettable event. It wasn't just about taking photos, it was about transformation. People walked in as their everyday selves and walked out feeling like models, celebrities, or pop stars. But what exactly was Glamour Shots, and how did it become such a massive trend in malls across America? And just as importantly, how did this phenomenon fade so quickly after reaching its peak? To answer that, we have to rewind to the late 1980s. The concept of glamour shots was born in 1988. At the time, malls were at their cultural peak. They weren't just shopping centers, they were social hubs, fashion runways, and teenage hangouts. Malls were where trends were born, and a place where people spent entire weekends browsing stores, grabbing food in the food court, and showing off the latest styles. Bunting saw an opportunity to combine the booming mall culture with the growing interest in fashion photography. His idea was simple but brilliant: offer everyday people a chance to look like they belonged on the cover of a magazine. For a reasonable price, you could get a full makeover, hair, makeup, wardrobe, and then a professional photo shoot that made you look like a star. This concept tapped into something powerful, especially in the late 80s and early 90s. The era was defined by big hair, bold fashion, and flashy aesthetics. Music videos on MTV were everywhere. Supermodels like Cindy Crawford and Claudia Schiffer were household names, and everyone wanted a glamorous portrait that felt larger than life. Glamour Shots provided exactly that. The first Glamour Shots studio opened in Dallas and quickly became a hit. People loved the idea of transformation, and the process itself was part of the fun. Customers would arrive and be greeted by stylists who would give them a dramatic makeover. Think bold makeup with heavy contour, dark lipsticks, metallic eyeshadows, and thick eyeliner, classic 90s looks that made a statement. Hair was teased, curled, or sprayed into gravity-defying shapes, often with plenty of volume. Wardrobe options were also provided, from leather jackets to feather boas, sequin tops, and dramatic off-the-shoulder outfits that screamed high-fashion glamour. Once the makeover was complete, customers stepped into the studio for a professional photo shoot, complete with soft lighting, smoky backdrops, and carefully staged poses. The photos had a signature style, slightly airbrushed, soft-focused, and always designed to make the subject look like a movie star. For many people, it was the first time that they had ever professionally styled and photographed. The results felt magical. By the early 90s, Glamour Shots had expanded rapidly. The brand opened studios in malls across the United States, and at its peak there were over 300 locations. It became a phenomenon for women of all ages, but especially for teenagers and young adults. For high school girls, getting glamour shots done before prom or graduation was almost a rite of passage. Moms booked glamour shots as a fun way to treat themselves or celebrate milestones. Couples would come in for romantic photo sessions, and families often turned to glamour shots for unique portraits that stood out from the traditional look. One of the keys to glamour shot success was its ability to make the experience feel like an event. It wasn't just about taking pictures, it was about the thrill of transformation. You didn't just show up for a headshot, you left with a memory of the entire process. Friends would often come in groups, laughing through their makeovers and cheering each other on during their photo sessions. For many, it felt like stepping into a fantasy world for a few hours. The brand also did a great job of marketing itself as accessible luxury. The prices were often affordable compared to hiring a professional photographer and stylist separately, but the end result looked like something you'd see in a fashion magazine. Glamour Shots tapped into the idea that everyone, no matter their age or background, deserved to feel glamorous. By the mid-90s, Glamour Shots had become a pop culture staple. It was referenced in TV shows and movies, and the photos themselves became iconic. The distinctive style of glamour shot portraits, soft lighting, over-the-top styling, and dramatic poses was instantly recognizable. It was a snapshot of the 90s fashion and beauty trends in their purest form. The brand even expanded internationally, opening studios in countries like Japan and Mexico. But as quickly as Glamour Shots rose to fame, its decline began in the late 90s. Part of the issue was that trends were shifting. The minimalism of the late 90s and early 2000s replaced the bold, flashy looks of the late 80s and early 90s. People started preferring more natural makeup, simpler hairstyles, and less staged photography. The over-the-top glamour that had once felt exciting began to feel dated. Another major factor was the rise of digital photography. In the 90s, professional photos were a big deal because most people didn't have access to high-quality cameras. By the early 2000s, digital cameras became more affordable and accessible, allowing people to take their own high-resolution photos at home. Soon after, smartphones and social media completely changed the way people thought about photography. Instead of saving up for a professional photo shoot, people could snap, edit, and share photos instantly. Glamour Shots also struggled to evolve with the times. While some studios tried to update their styling and photography techniques, the brand was so closely tied to its 90s aesthetic that it was hard to break free from that image. For many people, Glamour Shots became associated with outdated fashion and cheesy mall culture. By the 2010s, most Glamour Shots locations had closed, leaving only a handful still operating. Even so, Glamour Shots has never completely disappeared from public memory. In fact, in recent years, there's been a wave of nostalgia for all things 90s, and Glamour Shots is a part of that. Social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram are filled with people sharing their old Glamour Shot portraits, often laughing at the wild hairstyles and makeup, but also feeling nostalgic for that era. Some people even recreate their old Glamour Shots photos for fun, turning it into a playful throwback trend. Looking back, Glamour Shots was more than just a photography studio. It was a cultural phenomenon that captured the spirit of its time. It gave people the chance to feel special, confident, and glamorous in a way that few other experiences could. In a world before selfies and filters, Glamour Shots was the closest thing to becoming a magazine cover star for the day. The legacy of Glamour Shots lives in how we think about transformation and self-expression. Today, we have endless ways to edit, filter, and glam up our own photos. But back then, the experience of going to a studio, getting pampered, and seeing yourself transformed was magical. Glamour Shots made glamour feel attainable for everyone. It wasn't reserved for celebrities or models. It was for anyone willing to sit in a stylish chair and embrace the moment. Could Glamour Shots make a comeback in the era of Instagram and TikTok? It's an interesting question. On one hand, we live in a world saturated with instant photography. But on the other hand, people love unique, nostalgic experiences they can share online. A modernized version of Glamour Shots, with updated styling, cool backdrops, and high-quality digital photos could actually thrive as a retro experience. In a way, it might feel fresh again because it offers something different from the endless stream of phone selfies. The style of Glamour Shots is ultimately a story about the 90s itself, an era defined by boldness, creativity, and a willingness to embrace excess. It was a time when bigger was better, whether it was your hair, your fashion, or your attitude. Glamour Shots gave people permission to shine, to take up space, and to feel like they were the star of their own photo shoot. And even though the era of mall photo studios has largely passed, the photos remain as little time capsules of that energy. Glamour Shots remind us that history isn't just about big events or famous figures. It's also about the small cultural moments that shaped how we lived, dressed, and celebrated ourselves. For anyone who ever walked into a Glamour Shot studio and left with a stack of glossy portraits, it was more than just a photo session. It was a memory, a confidence boost, and a reminder that sometimes it's fun to go all out and embrace a little glamour. Even though most Glamour Shots locations have closed, the brand's impact on pop culture remains strong. Old Glamour Shots photos are still instantly recognizable, and they continue to spark conversations about 90s style and nostalgia. They're a reminder of a time when malls were the center of teenage life, when feather boas and sequins felt like the height of fashion, and when taking a photo meant something special. In today's digital age, where we take hundreds of photos without thinking twice, there's something charming about the idea of a single photo session that felt like an event. Glamour Shots may have been a product of its time, but that's exactly what makes it fascinating. It captured a cultural moment that was colorful, bold, and unapologetically fun. And who knows, maybe one day a new generation will rediscover the joy of mall photo studios, giving Glamour Shots the comeback it deserves. Like, comment, and subscribe for daily history and culture content.